Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're opening up a file that sits right at the intersection of history, engineering, and maybe even theoretical physics. Our mission is to explore one of the most enduring mysteries of the ancient world, of the massive, just impossible structures like the pyramids and Baalbek get built.
Right.
And then we are specifically diving into the compelling, though, highly controversial possibility that ancient civilizations mastered acoustic levitation.
The ability to lift colossal multi-ton weights using nothing but focused sound and vibration.
Exactly.
And it's a fascinating area because it sort of bypasses the common pitfalls of typical lost knowledge theories.
How so?
Well, if we talk about forgotten ancient medicines or rituals, the practical application today is often it's marginal or it's anecdotal, like a swami curing an infection with pine nuts. Interesting, but
not world-changing.
Not world-changing. But if ancient cultures genuinely possess the ability to neutralize gravity or levitate 1,000-ton blocks, that's not just historical trivia.
No, that's a fundamental, potentially world-changing technology.
Absolutely. The implications for construction, for deep space travel, energy, they're staggering.
Right.
Which is exactly why we have to follow the evidence and the legends surrounding sound-based levitation.
And the persistent mystery, it really forces us into this territory, doesn't it? I mean, the core question isn't just how they built them. That assumes they use methods we understand.
Right.
But why? Why use stones of this size in the first place?
Yeah.
When you look at Giza or Stonehenge, why did the builders use these huge, ridiculously heavy megaliths?
When they could have used smaller blocks.
Exactly. Smaller, readily available brick-sized blocks could have achieved the same structural result with, a fraction of the effort.
Unless it implies that the effort required to move a 1-ton block versus, say, a 100-ton block was fundamentally similar to them.
Okay, now that's an interesting thought.
If the method they used was independent of mass, say it was based on manipulating resonant frequency, then using the largest blocks available makes perfect sense.
Because it increases stability and durability.
Precisely. And that leads us right to the core conflict we face today. In the lab, we can absolutely perform acoustic levitation. It's real.
Right. We see those videos.
Yeah. We can manipulate droplets of liquid, microchips, tiny little pieces of styrofoam, but we're talking about millimeters of displacement and milligrams of mass.
Like tiny objects.
The chasm we have to cross is understanding whether ancient cultures could somehow scale this technology up. Could they manipulate objects weighing hundreds or even thousands of tons? Did they find some kind of physics loophole that we're still searching for?
Okay, so let's start by establishing that sheer mind-boggling scale of ancient construction. I think this is the foundational reason people even look for these alternative non-mechanical theories.
It has to be.
The standard explanation for the Great Pyramid of Giza. That's our starting point.
Okay, so the widely accepted theory, the mainstream one, it posits a massive, organized effort. You've got a dedicated workforce, maybe around 5,000 skilled men, and they're working for about 2 decades.
And their tools are simple?
Yeah. Very simple. Ropes made of plant fiber, basic wooden sledges, leverage from wooden beams, and these enormous external ramps and cranes made of earth and wood.
And that seems plausible on the surface. You hear it and you think, okay, lots of people, lots of time.
It seems plausible until you try to visualize the physics and the logistics of the operation.
Right.
Exactly. And that's the skeptical counterpoint that starts to unravel the whole narrative. Let's just consider the ramps for a second.
Okay.
To lift multi-ton blocks all the way to the pyramid's apex, we're talking over 480 feet high, you would need a ramp built at a manageable grade.
You can't just go straight up.
No, maybe 8 to 10 degrees max.
Yeah.
That ramp would have to be incredibly long, wide, and structurally sound to support the weight of the blocks and the thousands of men dragging them.
So if you do the math, if you calculate the sheer volume required for those logistical structures,
the calculations become a huge problem. Depending on the ramp design, whether it's a straight-on ramp or one that spirals around the pyramid, some estimates show that the volume of material needed for the ramps and scaffolding
would have exceeded the volume of the Great Pyramid itself.
Yes, we're talking about millions of cubic meters of material earth, rubble, and massive, massive quantities of timber.
Which leads to the big logistical ghost in the room. Where is it?
Where is it?
If you spent 20 years building up this massive logistical mountain of ramp material, once the pyramid was finished, you'd have to dismantle all of that. You'd have to dispose of it.
The scale of the debris field, the wood remnants, the earth mounds, it would be astronomical. Yet, aside from the pyramids themselves, the Giza Plateau is remarkably clean.
It is.
The absence of this astronomical amount of construction debris, it just strongly suggests that they employed a method that fundamentally bypassed the need for those massive, temporary external structures.
Okay, so Giza is already challenging the mainstream story.
And if Giza is challenging, we now have to move on to sites where the scale moves from impressive to, well, to physically impossible using any known ancient technologies.
And for that, we head to Baalbek in Lebanon, the site of the Temple of Jupiter.
The structures here are so far beyond Giza's scale that it almost defies comparison.
Baalbek contains the 3 largest stone blocks ever incorporated into a man-made structure. They're called the trilithon.
And each one of those blocks is estimated to weigh between 800 and 1,000 tons.
Okay, just for a moment, let's help people visualize that. 1,000 tons. What is that?
1,000 tons is the approximate weight of 2 fully loaded Airbus A380 jets, or about 20 main battle tanks. This is not just a heavy block of stone, it's an industrial-scale mass.
And the critical detail here isn't just the weight, it's our own modern limitations.
Precisely. We simply cannot match this feat. I want to be clear about this. No modern industrial equipment in existence today.
But the biggest cranes.
No. Not the world's largest self-propelled modular transports, not the highest capacity super cranes designed for nuclear power plants. None of them can safely lift and position one of these blocks. Period.
And yet somehow ancient builders placed them.
And they did so with astonishing accuracy. They are fitted together so perfectly that you genuinely cannot slip a razor blade or even a piece of paper between them.
That combination of immense mass and sub-millimeter precision, that's what truly baffles engineers today.
The logistics of quarrying it, shaping it, moving it, and then trimming and fitting a 1,000-ton block in place, it defies every principle of mechanical advantage and friction we understand from that era.
And it gets even more unbelievable because nearby, still in the quarry, is the 4th stone.
Hajja el-Hibla, the stone of the south. It remains attached to the bedrock, but it's been fully quarried and shaped.
And its weight is estimated at
1,200 tons.
So if you try to calculate the raw, brute manpower, just to budget, not lift it, just to get it moving.
The numbers are just ridiculous. Conservative estimates place the requirement at over 16,000 men, just pushing or pulling, all at the same time.
The coordination required for that kind of force would be an organizational nightmare.
Let alone the physical space needed for 16,000 men to stand shoulder to shoulder with ropes. I mean, the existence of this stone raises a question. Did they fail to move it because their method failed, or was it simply too heavy even for their advanced technique?
But the fact that they quarried it and shaped it suggests they fully intended to move it.
It implies a confidence in their transportation method that is wholly unjustified by any traditional means we know of.
Okay, so from the Middle East, let's take a vast geographical leap, halfway across the globe to the island of Pompeii in Micronesia.
To Nan Madol. This is often called the Machu Picchu of the Pacific.
And its challenge is less about the individual weight of the largest stones,
and more about the insane logistical environment.
It's truly unique. Nan Madol is the only ancient city ever built entirely upon a coral reef.
A city built on the ocean, it dates back to roughly 200 BC, and the engineering, given the isolation, it's just mind-boggling.
So describe the construction.
The city is constructed of hundreds of stacked, thick, hexagonal basalt stone logs. They look like massive, naturally formed bundles of firewood, and they create these monumental walls up to 40 feet high and 18 feet thick.
40 feet high. That's taller than a 3-story building.
Easily. A 4-story building, actually.
And the weight of these basalt logs.
They vary, but they're substantial. The average logs are about 3 meters long, a meter in diameter. They weigh about 2.5 tons.
Manageable, maybe, with a lot of men and sledges.
Perhaps. But the logs used for the most crucial structural components, the high walls that have to resist powerful Pacific storms, those weigh as much as 50 tons each.
50 tons.
Yeah.
Stacked 40 feet in the air. On a precarious coral reef base, this is the critical logistical challenge.
Right. And you have to remember the builders of Nan Madol were operating essentially with Stone Age technology. They were isolated, they had no access to metal, no sophisticated pulleys, only basic levers.
So moving a 50-ton object across water, then lifting it 4 stories high onto a shifting, unstable foundation without metal tools or complex mechanics.
By traditional archaeology, it's an utter impossibility.
So the need to move this heavy, dense basalt, which is prone to fracturing if you don't support it correctly.
It strongly suggests they had a method that minimized contact and friction. And this context is precisely why many researchers start to look for alternative explanations.
Like acoustic or sonic manipulation.
Exactly, a method where the weight of the stone becomes secondary to its resonant frequency.
Now, the impossibility of these construction feats, that would be enough on its own to fuel speculation. But what gives the acoustic levitation theory real weight is that the speculation often aligns perfectly with the local legends and the historical accounts.
That's the key. It seems wherever these immense megaliths exist, there's an accompanying legend that explains their movement not through brute labor,
but through sound or chant or magic.
Let's start with Nan Madol again. The local accounts are not shy about their explanation at all.
What do they say?
They speak of the stones being brought by ancient voyagers or giants who flew great canoes and used some form of magic to levitate the basalt logs into position.
Effortless, non-mechanical movement. It's central to the history of the site.
It is. Now, if we shift back to the Middle East, we find a much more structured historical account that points toward directed sonic energy. And that's the work of the 10th century historian Abul Hasan Al-Masudi.
Now, this isn't just some random storyteller. Al-Masudi is a highly regarded figure.
He's often called the Herodotus of the Arabs. He was an extensive traveler. He compiled an immense 30-volume history, and he settled in Egypt. So he was exposed to ancient knowledge and accounts that are now lost to us.
And he described the pyramids with awe. But he also recorded this exceptionally detailed and baffling passage on how the colossal blocks were transported.
Right. And let's break down his description carefully because every detail feels potentially significant.
Okay.
He described a process that was part ritual, part technology. First, a piece of what he called magic papyrus, which was imprinted with specific symbols, was carefully placed underneath the stone.
So, step 1, the papyrus with symbols.
Step 2, the stone was struck with a metal rod.
Struck with a rod, okay.
And the result, he says the stone slowly, almost reluctantly rose above the ground.
So we have 3 components right there. The papyrus may be a tuning element, the rod is a striking force, and metal.
Right. And once it was floating, the stone would move along a specifically paved path that was fenced in by a series of precisely spaced metal poles.
So it's guided.
It's guided. It traveled for about 50 meters, which is a significant distance, before it gently settled back down. And at that point, the process would be repeated for the next leg of the journey.
Now, to an audience in the 10th century, or frankly to most of us today, this sounds utterly fantastical. How do researchers interpret this now through a technological lens?
Well, they strip away the subjective language, the magic, and the symbols. The striking of the stone with the metal rod is interpreted as creating a precise acoustic resonance.
Okay.
The metal conducting a high-frequency vibration into the stone block itself. I mean, if you strike any material at its precise resonant frequency, you can reduce its apparent weight or even cause destructive effects like shattering glass.
And the metal poles. What role could they possibly play in a sonic or vibrational theory?
The metal poles fencing the path. They're interpreted as being necessary components to create and focus high-frequency standing waves.
Oh.
If the poles were precisely spaced, they could act as reflectors or waveguides, creating a fixed acoustic field that maintained the levitation effect over that 50-meter span. The paved path would ensure a consistent medium or maybe even serve as a ground-based reflector. It's a whole system.
The system for generating, focusing, and guiding sonic energy.
Exactly, and this is where we absolutely must bring in Arthur C. Clarke's third law, because Al-Masudi's description is the perfect real-world example of it.
Remind us of the law.
The law states, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Right.
Al-Masudi was a highly educated observer, but he was observing a technological base likely derived from an even older Egyptian knowledge that was millennia ahead of his own. How else could he describe a finely tuned resonant chamber and an acoustic waveguide other than as magic papyrus and metal poles?
He was describing the effect, not the mechanism.
That's it. If you imagine a person from the year 800 AD witnessing someone turn on a massive maglev train today.
They might describe the track being lined with magic metal boxes that made the train float.
Precisely. It's a beautiful lens through which to view ancient history.
And this interpretation is also bolstered by what we know about the Egyptians themselves.
It is. The architecture of the Great Pyramid of Giza is itself an acoustic marvel. The internal chambers, especially the famous King's Chamber, possess these extraordinary acoustic properties. They amplify and focus sounds at certain frequencies in very predictable ways.
Which suggests the builders had a sophisticated, specialized knowledge of sound science, acoustics, and resonant geometry.
They weren't just stacking stones, they were engineering a sonic environment.
So whether the striking rod created mechanical vibration that resulted in acoustic levitation, or whether the geometry of the entire construction site created a giant resonant cavity.
The common element is a profound understanding and intentional manipulation of sound waves.
And this specific type of account stones moved by striking or by chanting or by sophisticated instruments, that's the common thread we see across all these globally distributed megalithic sites.
From the chants of the Easter Island statues, to the instruments used in Tibet, to Al-Masudi's account in Egypt, and the magic of Nan Madol, the recurring narrative of sound-based power strongly suggests a shared, forgotten knowledge base that overcame the limitations of friction and mass.
Okay, so if this knowledge was indeed lost, we have to ask if there are any modern accounts, even unverified or suppressed ones, that suggest sound manipulation on a massive scale is possible.
And the 20th century provides two highly discussed, though completely distinct, anecdotal cases. The first one is the highly controversial account involving the Tibetan monks in 1939.
This story relies entirely on the testimony of one person, right?
Yes, a Swedish medical doctor named Dr. Jal. He was allegedly brought to a remote part of Tibet to treat a high-ranking holy man, and after successfully treating him and earning the profound trust of the monks, they decided to offer him a spectacular demonstration of their advanced knowledge.
And that demonstration was the precise, deliberate use of sound to levitate a heavy stone slab up a high cliff face. So let's talk about the setup, because the logistics here are key to understanding the potential physics involved.
Okay. So Dr. Jal was led to a meadow surrounded by sheer, high cliffs. The objective stone, a massive slab, was placed on the ground about 250 meters from the cliff face.
Right.
The monks then arranged 19 musical instruments in a precise 90-degree arc around the stone.
What kind of instruments?
Primarily 13 large drums and 6 long metal trumpets.
That choice of instruments is interesting. Drums give you rhythmic, low-frequency, high-amplitude percussion,
while the trumpets would provide directional, focused sound waves at very specific frequencies.
So it's fundamentally a system for generating and controlling multiple specific wavelengths at the same time.
Precisely. The monks then began a coordinated chant or prayer, slowly increasing the tempo and the volume of the instruments. The entire process was one of slow, rhythmic escalation.
And Dr. Jha reported that for the first 4 minutes, nothing happened.
Right, which indicates a buildup of energy or maybe the synchronization of the frequencies. But then, as the noise reached this crescendo, the stone began to visibly rock and sway, and then suddenly, it took off.
It didn't shoot up, did it?
No, he said it rose steadily, gaining height until it landed precisely on a prepared platform on the hilltop, about 250 meters above its starting position.
And he said the feat was repeated multiple times, moving other slabs.
He did. And here's where the story hits the wall of modern skepticism and controversy. Dr. Jal claimed he filmed the entire event.
So, where's the footage?
That is the million-dollar question. The report states that the film footage was subsequently confiscated and classified by intelligence services, which suggests that if the footage was real, it captured a significant technological breakthrough.
But without the film, the entire story remains an anecdote.
It does, but the level of detail provided by a credible witness, like a medical doctor, makes it compelling enough for people to try and model it scientifically.
And you mentioned there's a paper that attempts to do just that.
Yes. The geometry itself points toward resonant manipulation. The 90-degree arc, the precise 250-meter distance to the cliff face, and the specific arrangement of instruments. It all strongly suggests they were creating a highly tuned standing wave field.
And the cliff face would be essential.
It would act as a massive, dense reflector. It would be essential to the process, creating the necessary boundary condition for the standing wave to form. The paper hypothesized that the key lay in achieving a specific geodetic alignment and frequency resonance that dramatically lowered the effective mass of the stone relative to the atmospheric pressure wave.
That's just incredible. The idea that the entire landscape was integrated into the technological process.
It is. Now let's move from the thin, high air of the Himalayas to the humid, swampy landscape of Florida, where another great megalithic mystery was built, well, in plain sight in the 20th century.
Coral Castle.
Coral Castle. This entire complex was constructed between 1923 and 1951 by one man.
Edward Leedskalnin.
A frail Latvian immigrant, stood only 5 feet tall, weighed barely 100 pounds, yet he constructed this massive, intricate stone compound entirely by himself.
And the scale is immense. It easily rivals ancient feats. The whole complex is built of nearly 1,000 tons of quarried coral rock,
Which he somehow shaped, carved, and positioned without any assistance.
The size of his individual stones is genuinely alarming. The largest rock on the property is estimated to weigh 35 tons.
35 tons. To put that into the context of Giza, that is double the size of the largest blocks used in the construction of the Great Pyramid.
The feat of a single diminutive man achieving this, ostensibly without any heavy machinery. It's a modern enigma that traditional engineering just cannot solve.
The standard mechanical advantage required, the fulcrums, the levers, specialized rollers, that would still require dozens of men, not one.
And the masterpiece of the complex, and maybe the greatest mystery, is the 9-ton stone gate.
Ah, the gate.
It fits into its frame with only a quarter-inch of clearance, yet it is so perfectly balanced and centered on its axis.
That a child could push it open with a single finger.
Achieving that level of gravitational balance and frictionless rotation on a 9-ton object requires engineering precision that challenges modern teams with lasers and computer modeling.
Yet Leedskalnin achieved it, alone.
And of course, he worked in total secrecy.
Yes, he was obsessive about privacy. He worked almost exclusively at night, actively discouraged any observers or visitors while he was building, so there are no direct, verifiable eyewitness accounts of his lifting methods.
But the rumors surrounding his work are consistent with the ancient legends we've discussed.
Absolutely. The stories from spying teenagers and local residents who glimpsed his work, they suggest they saw him float coral blocks through the air like hydrogen balloons.
Which implies an effortless, mechanical free movement, similar to the Nan Madol legends.
It does. And Leedskalnin himself hinted at a deep recovered knowledge. He was very open about that.
What did he say?
He claimed to friends that he had discovered the secrets of the pyramids, that he'd found the method used by ancient builders across the world, Egypt, Peru, Asia, to raise blocks weighing many tons using only primitive tools.
So he explicitly believed that the ancient masters had a method for overcoming gravity.
He did, and he also claimed, as a practicing Freemason, that he was exposed to this secret knowledge through his contacts in that organization.
And while he never named sound specifically, he did have an intense documented interest in radio, magnetism, and various types of sound and electrical equipment.
Right, which he used for unknown purposes in his complex. Given the overwhelming global evidence pointing toward acoustic energy, his interest in frequency and vibration, well, it seems to be a very significant coincidence.
Okay, so we have established the logistical impossibility of the megaliths. We have these widespread ancient legends of sonic power, and we have modern, albeit anecdotal, accounts of mass manipulation.
Right, so now we have to transition from historical anecdote to hard science. We have to ask, what is the current physics of acoustic levitation, and how might the ancients have scaled it?
Let's start with the absolute basics, because we often think of sound as just something we hear. What is sound physically?
Sound is not mystical. It's purely mechanical energy. It's created when molecules of a medium, air, water, even rock vibrate. And that creates these propagating waves of compression and rarefaction.
And our ears interpret the resulting pressure changes. But the core reality is that acoustic waves are a physical movement of mass, a transfer of momentum.
And that physical presence is crucial. We feel the bass at a concert, which is low-frequency, high-amplitude energy.
Right.
We use ultrasound in medicine to destroy kidney stones lithotripsy by focusing sonic energy to shatter the target material. We can shatter a wine glass with a tuned frequency. These are all demonstrations of sound as a powerful physical force.
So current acoustic levitation techniques capitalize on this force. They use sound traveling through medium, usually air, to create an upward pressure that exactly counteracts gravity.
That's the principle.
So to achieve this, what are the modern technical requirements for a levitator?
You need two key components that have to work in perfect tandem. First is the transducer. That's the vibrating surface that generates the high-frequency sound. Think of it as a super-tuned speaker.
Okay. And the second?
The second, you need a reflector. And this has to be positioned precisely to bounce the sound waves back, creating an interference pattern.
And this interference pattern is the critical step, right? This is where the physics actually happen.
Exactly. When the sound waves meet the reflected waves, they create what are called standing waves. And a standing wave has fixed points of high pressure, known as antinodes, and fixed points of zero pressure, known as nodes.
So acoustic levitation happens when you trap a small object in one of those nodes.
A pressure node, yes. So you're not lifting the object by just blasting sound at it. You're trapping it in a stable, fixed pocket of pressurized air.
So the surrounding high-pressure zones, the antinodes, they effectively squeeze the object and hold it in place against gravity.
Precisely. And this works incredibly well for light objects like small water droplets or tiny plastic beads because they can fit neatly into a single, small pressure node.
Now we get to the math requirement, which is highly sensitive. You can't just slap a speaker and a reflector together.
No, the placement is unforgivingly precise. For the standing wave to form effectively and consistently, the distance between the transducer and the reflector has to be an exact multiple of half of the wavelength of the sound being emitted.
So if you're off by a fraction of a millimeter,
The standing wave collapses and the object drops.
and this precision is what allowed that Tibetan monk anecdote to be modeled scientifically. Let's go back to that 1939 setup and apply the physics of standing waves.
Okay. The monk's 19 instruments acted as a massive, unified transducer. The arrangement was aimed 250 meters at the heavy stone, and that stone was positioned in front of a cliff face. The geometry strongly suggests they were aiming for a standing wave where the high-density cliff face acted as the reflector.
So the key is at 250-meter distance. If the sounds generated by their 13 drums and 6 trumpets were tuned to specific wavelengths,
A correlation should exist between those wavelengths and the 250-meter gap. The hypothesis is that 250 meters was the exact length required to create a multiple of half a wavelength. But critically, they must have achieved a frequency that created a pressure node large enough to encompass the entire heavy stone.
and this brings us to the monumental scaling problem, the great technological barrier we face today. Why can't we take this proven principle and scale it up to lift a 1,000-ton Baalbek block?
There are two main hurdles: wavelength, which determines the node size, and amplitude, which is the power.
Okay, let's start with the node size.
To levitate a 1,000-ton block, you need a pressure node, that tiny air pocket holding the object that is large enough to contain the entire block. The size of the node is directly related to the wavelength of the sound. So to create a node that's several meters wide,
You would need incredibly low-frequency sounds.
subsonic infrasound, meaning massive wavelengths.
And creating massive, stable pressure zones using infrasound requires.
Well, that leads to the second hurdle: power and amplitude. To hold up a 1,000-ton object, the intensity of the pressure waves required to sustain that standing wave would be catastrophic.
Catastrophic how?
We are talking about sound amplitudes far beyond anything conventional materials can withstand. The sheer mechanical energy needed to stabilize the object against gravity, accounting for its mass and density, is currently considered unattainable without ripping apart the environment or the source of the sound itself.
So that suggests that if the ancients actually achieved this, they were not just using sound in the way we understand it today.
No. They must have discovered a way to dramatically reduce the effective mass or the acoustic impedance of the stone.
That's the ultimate conclusion then. They weren't fighting gravity by overpowering it with raw sound volume.
They were bypassing it by finding the precise resonant frequency of the object's molecular structure. Every object has a fundamental resonant frequency. If they could tune their instruments or their process to match the resonance of that 1,000-ton block, they may have temporarily minimized the forces holding the atoms together, essentially making the object behave like a much lighter material.
It's the difference between hitting a piece of glass with a hammer until it breaks.
Versus finding the exact musical note that shatters it instantly. The latter requires minimal energy but maximum precision.
So the science of acoustic levitation is sound. Pardon the pun. The mechanism is understood.
What is lacking is the knowledge base that allows for that perfect, scalable precision to overcome mass density, a knowledge base that ancient cultures, judging by the consistent legends, seem to have possessed.
Which brings us to a really critical discussion point. Why? If the underlying science of acoustic levitation is sound, and the historical accounts are so consistent, why are these theories about megaliths almost universally dismissed as fringe?
Or even labeled as pseudoscience by the mainstream establishment.
It's the labeling issue, and it's pervasive. Any concept that suggests ancient peoples possessed knowledge superior to our own, especially knowledge that fundamentally challenges our understanding of Newtonian mechanics, is often dismissed out of hand.
It's an intellectual defense mechanism.
It has to be.
And you have to ask, isn't pseudoscience only pseudoscience until the moment it becomes actual science? History shows us repeatedly that intellectual progress occurs not by accepting the status quo, but by challenging the established dogma, often violently.
The history of science is just littered with visionaries who were initially ridiculed or completely rejected. I mean, look at Copernicus and Kepler. Their heliocentric models fundamentally challenged the geocentric view that had been accepted for millennia.
And they were initially treated as heresy. Or consider Louis Pasteur. When he presented his germ theory, suggesting invisible pathogens cause disease, the entire medical establishment, which believed sickness was caused by imbalances of humors, they ridiculed him.
They simply couldn't accept a reality they couldn't see.
Or Gregor Mendel, the father of modern genetics. His detailed, rigorous work on inheritance was completely ignored by the mainstream scientific community for decades because it didn't fit the prevailing theories of evolution at the time.
Of course, Nikola Tesla.
Nikola Tesla. His visions of wireless energy transmission, radical forms of electricity, they were frequently dismissed, suppressed, or just ignored in favor of more conventional, controllable, and profitable technologies. He was a visionary who paid the price for being too far ahead of his time.
What connects all these examples to acoustic levitation is the magnitude of the claim. Claiming that a small, old man in Florida moved 35-ton blocks challenges basic engineering dogma.
But claiming that sound can overcome gravity, that challenges basic physics dogma, and that is often seen as the ultimate intellectual sin. It's the defense of the current intellectual order. The institutional arrogance confuses what we currently know with what is ultimately possible.
So if you suggest today that we can lift 1,000 tons with a focused frequency, you're immediately attacked.
Viciously attacked, because that capability would rewrite textbooks and invalidate billions of dollars of existing infrastructure based on conventional methods.
And this skepticism can be seen even in how major institutions react to demonstrable innovation today. It's a fear of the paradigm shift.
It is absolutely a fear of paradigm shift. The consistent historical pattern is that the establishment dismisses radical concepts not because of a lack of evidence, but because of a lack of imagination. They often look at a novel idea and measure it against current constraints rather than against future potential.
That's the tragic part. We need people who are willing to ignore that skepticism. Think of the pioneers of modern technology, people like Steve Jobs or Elon Musk.
Constantly met with skepticism.
Jobs ignored the consensus that nobody needed a unified mobile device. Musk ignored the consensus that private companies couldn't build rockets or electric car companies.
And they succeeded because they operated on the principle that the impossible is usually just the unachieved. It's often hidden in plain sight. They are the modern blasphemers. George Bernard Shaw encapsulated this perfectly. He said, "All great truths begin as blasphemies."
So the lesson here is for you, for the listeners. If you're exploring an idea, whether it's acoustic physics, free energy, or radical transportation, that the mainstream dismisses, remember that dismissal is often simply a measure of how far ahead of the curve you are. The world needs the people who ignore the noise and pursue the lost knowledge, because the greatest advancements often lie in the ideas the consensus rejects.
As we conclude this deep dive, we've synthesized historical evidence, global legends, and modern physics. We've established the profound and, I think, undeniable mysteries of megalithic construction, the 1,000-ton precision blocks of Baalbek,
and the 50-ton logs stacked on the fragile coral reef of Nan Madol. These feats remain mechanically impossible by the standards of their reported construction eras.
We've also shown that across diverse ancient cultures, from Tibet to Egypt to Micronesia, the explanation for these feats is repeatedly attributed to sonic power, acoustic resonance, or structured chanting.
Never merely to brute force and large numbers of slaves.
Never. And critically, we've confirmed that the underlying science of acoustic levitation is entirely real. Sound can counteract gravity. It demonstrates a verifiable link between the ancient claims and modern physics.
The primary barrier remaining is one of scale,
which suggests that the ancient builders must have possessed a specialized technological mastery over sound a way to precisely match the resonant frequency of massive objects that we have yet to rediscover. They weren't fighting gravity, they were perhaps tuning the molecular bonds of the stone itself.
Which leaves us with this final thought for you to consider. If ancient people mastered sound to overcome a fundamental, universal force like gravity, What other fundamental forces, magnetic, thermal, or even nuclear, did they understand that we've simply forgotten or dismissed as magic? Is the ultimate limitation on our current engineering not a lack of resources, but simply that we haven't found the right frequency, the right wavelength, or the right geometry to unlock the secrets hidden within the world's heaviest stones?